Now I'd like to switch gears, and I'd like to spend a minute talking about the World Trade Center. There's a professor named Judy Wood, and she wrote a book that's like a college textbook. It's a standard-sized textbook and weighs about 10 pounds. And she did an analysis on what happened at the World Trade Center. She's not saying who did it because she has no idea who did it, but she did an engineering analysis of the facts of what happened at the World Trade Center. And I'm not going to dwell on this too much because I'm only halfway through the book, and I'm sure I'll get a lot more information about it. But in the half of the textbook I've read so far, what she has scientifically proven was that when the World Trade Centers collapsed, there was no explosives involved. There was no a lot of rumors out there about, it was a demolition where demolition experts went in and put charges on each floor and set them off and caused the buildings to collapse in a standard format. Other people said thermite was used to cut the iron beams and cause the collapse. She proves without a doubt that there was nothing whatsoever to do with explosives causing a standard collapse, like a demolition company would go in and cause a building to collapse in its own footprint. None of that took place at the World Trade Center. And she said both of the two towers collapsed in under 10 seconds. Now, if the World Trade Center buildings had collapsed as a result of demolition, each building would have taken 90 seconds to fall because the premise on a building collapse that's done by demolition charges, the upper floors will blow, and that floor will fall down onto the floor under it, and then they'll blow the charges for that one, and they time it to just as the upper floor hits the floor below it and the group of floors, they set off the charges one after the other, so it's like boom, 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 boom. Well, when you have 110 stories and it's about 1 second per floor, it takes 90 seconds to bring the building down. Well, she unequivocally proves with her engineering background that did not take place. And so anybody that is interested could buy her book and read it. It's What Happened to the World Trade Center. What she shows is the buildings were turned to dust. They were destroyed at the atomic level, the molecular level or atomic level. The buildings, all the steel was turned to fine dust and no longer retained its structural integrity. It was just dust. It wasn't metal anymore. When they looked at the wreckage after everything, all it was dust. There wasn't even one faucet from a sink. There wasn't any toilet seats or anything. Sandy has a comment.
Just a little comment here. I was at the doctor's office yesterday, and we had been talking to the nurse practitioner, and she was a nurse that was actually sent out to the World Trade Center after the catastrophe, and she said there was literally dust. Everything was dust. So that just proves what Bob was talking about and what this gal had written in her book, What Happened to the World Trade Center. So it was just interesting.
And it was, so anyway, what was interesting is, I'm only halfway through the book. I don't have the answer what it was. Well, other than, as everybody knows, the word that is being used for what happened was a directed energy weapon. And, directed energy weapons are pretty much unknown to the populace. I didn't know anything about directed energy weapons either. But one of the other characteristics, so all these rumors about the airplanes hitting it, causing the fuel in the airplanes, causing the metal beams to lose their strength from the kerosene of the airplanes causing the building collapse. It's just a total fabrication. There's absolutely no truth in that whatsoever. So I just thought I'd throw that out. And the other thing that I've learned is that within a 7-block radius of the Twin Towers, there were 1,400 automobiles and trucks and fire equipment that was absolutely destroyed. Now, tell me how 2 airliners flying into a skyscraper are going to cause vehicles 7 blocks away to be turned to rust. And what's interesting about these 1,400 vehicles, a lot of them look like they've just turned to rust. I mean, all the plastic and everything is just gone. I mean, the engine blocks of some of these are disintegrated. I mean, there's no, a lot of engine blocks are like cast iron, like for a V8 engine in a Chevy SUV. It's a cast iron block and gone. Just nothing there. There's just an empty hole under the hood where the engine used to be. And another interesting thing about what happened was a number of the vehicles, one half of the vehicle looks like it was in a horrendous fire, and the other half of the vehicle looks like it just came off the showroom floor. Now, for anybody that has any common sense, how in the world would 2 airliners flying into a World Trade Center, on a high level on the floor, cause a SUV 7 blocks away to have half of it turned into rust and the other half in pristine condition? So that's some of the other evidence. And then you also have World Trade Center building number 7, which collapsed, and it wasn't even hit by an airliner. It collapsed, and even the news announcers were standing in front of the building announcing that World Trade Center 7 collapsed, and you could see behind the news reporter that the building 7 was still standing. So somewhere in there, there was something that was pre-planned on what to say. Now, I guess I could tell another quick story about this. We have time. There was this one lady right after 9/11 who worked at the World Trade Center. She worked on, I think, somewhere around the 52nd floor or something like that. And it was a single mother, and she had a little kid that she had to drop off at the babysitter every time she went to the World Trade Center. And on this particular morning of 9/11, she was running late with her kid, and had a hard time getting her kid dressed. I guess the kid wasn't feeling so hot and was really cranky and wouldn't put his clothes on and all that. You know how that happens with kids. And so she dropped the kid off a little bit late at the babysitter's, and she said when she was driving over the World Trade Center, she was really afraid her boss was going to get really mad at her because she was, running late to being at work. And she said that on a normal day when she gets to the World Trade Center, if she doesn't get there like 20 or 30 minutes earlier for her job, she has a very difficult time finding a place to park because all the parking spaces fill up and there's no place to park. So she was worried about that. And then when she actually arrived at the World Trade Center to go into work, she found that the parking lot was half empty. And she said, well, this is really strange, but she was delighted that she could actually find a parking spot right away. So she jumped out of her car and went running in to where the elevators were, and there was maybe a half a dozen people standing around. And the World Trade Center that she worked in, they have 4 elevators that go up to the upper floors. And being on the floor that she worked on a normal Monday morning, she said that she would have to wait for 4 cycles of the elevators before she could get on. That's how big the crowd would be. And she says only a half a dozen people got on her elevator, and as soon as the door opened, she stepped right in with a half dozen other people and went right up to her floor. And when she got to her floor, she stepped out of the elevator and walked down the hall to where her office was, and she was kind of wondering. The hallways were dark, and she said, on a normal Monday morning, all the offices on both sides of the hallway down to her office were busy. The doors would be open, people would be running in and out, and she went down to her office, and her secretary was there. And she walked in, and she said, well, where is everybody? There's nobody here. And they sat down, and they started discussing why nobody was in the World Trade Center. And so she, on her floor, they had a bunch of law offices. They had a bunch of stockbrokers and accountants and all sorts of people like that, very, professional offices. And there was only 2 offices open on her floor. And so she sat down with the secretary, and they were puzzling. Well, what's going on? Where is everybody? How come the parking lot isn't full and only a handful of people came into the building? And so they thought, well, maybe it's a Jewish holiday or something, because the Jews have holidays in September. So they pulled out the calendar and looked at the holy days, and they found out that particular Monday was not a holy day. It wasn't Yom Kippur or anything like that. So they were really puzzled, and then they thought, well, maybe they were doing a marathon race. A lot of times New York will have these races, marathon races around the city where they shut down a whole bunch of streets and they let everybody off and they go and watch the race. So they literally called the mayor's office to ask the mayor, if it was a holiday, if there was some sort of event going on, why there was nobody in the World Trade Center. And so the mayor's office said, no, it's just a normal day, just like everything else. And they just could not figure out why nobody showed up. Well, while they were, they tried everything they could think of, and they called some friends and see if they knew what was going on. They said, we have no idea, why all the offices were closed. So anyway, while they're pondering all this, the phone rings, and it turns out to be this lady's babysitter. And the lady's babysitter said, your kid is really sick. I can't deal with him. Come get him. And so this lady told the secretary, says, well, tell the boss, I'm sorry, I have to leave. I got to go take care of my kid. When the boss comes in, and he hadn't even arrived yet, tell the boss that, I'll contact him later and tell you what I'm doing with my kid. So she goes down the elevator, jumps in her car and drives over to her babysitter, which is like maybe 6 blocks away, and she parks in the driveway and runs into the house. And as she enters the house, the babysitter is in the living room with a widescreen TV on, and the first airplane hit the World Trade Center, and they watched it. And then and after that, they were glued to the TV while all the news press and everybody else was, telling everything. It became a national news, at that point, and they were watching the whole thing. And if it wasn't for this lady's, her kid being sick and having to go to a babysitter, she would have been one of the first victims to go down in the World Trade Center. Well, anyway, what I find interesting about all this, for all those people that say that, this was, done by a bunch of hijackers that flew the buildings into the World Trade Center and caused the buildings to collapse, it turns out that there were 21,000 people that lived or that worked in each of the towers. And of the 21,000 people, only 3,000 people died. Now, my question is, does it make sense that out of 21,000 people that are normally elbowing their way into the building on a Monday morning, lawyers and attorneys and CPAs and who knows what else, why would 18,000 people decide not to show up for work that particular day? Does that make sense? unless somebody knew ahead of time that something was going to happen. So anyway, anybody have any comment about that story?
Yes, this is Claudia. I really find that very informative that there is a scientific study presenting evidence that is counter to what has been given out to the public. And it takes a very, to me, a brave person to present a different viewpoint and to back it up with scientific fact. You can't argue with certain laws in science. You know, if you throw an apple up in the air, it's going to fall down to the ground. It's not going to float or go off the earth. And yet, here we have graphic evidence in front of us showing exactly what happens when something that is not a normal end result of, a building collapse being different and so much dust and powder being part of the scenario. It shows how much asleep we are, and that it's going to take a lot of, I guess you could say, a lot more, maybe. I don't know what it's going to take to get people to take a moment and consider the whole situation, the evidence, counter evidence, what's being presented. So thank you for sharing that with us, Bob. We really have a wonderful opportunity right now in this moment in time to question and to look and see if we can see what we're looking at. You know, like, you can't recognize a forest because there's so many trees in the way. Okay, here's another chance. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Claudia. Now, that brings up a good point that I'd like to share with everybody. I know most of the people listening right now are aware of this, but there may be people down the road that tune in and listen to this talk show down the road. And this would be a good time to share the new you with everybody. You know, there's a lot of things going on out there that we have no idea what the answer is. You know, we've been lied to and we've been brainwashed, we've been drugged down, all these things have been happening to the human population. And there is a way out of all this, or a way to find out what the truth is, and that is to do a new you session. And what the new you is a way of contacting the real guides that will show you the truth of what's real and what isn't. And so you sing new you about 10 or 15 minutes in the morning, sing it 10 to 15 minutes in the evening before you go to bed. And by doing it 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night, day after day, you're showing the real guides that you have intent to find out what's really going on. You're not going to buy the party line anymore. You really, really, really want to find out what the truth is. So you sing new you, and you can sing it like this. You can sing new you, or you can sing it new you, kind of like the old Beatles song. You can sing it any way you want, but sing it, and you will attract the attention of the real guides, and you can ask them whatever you want. Any question you have, you can ask them to give you an answer of any question in your life that you want to know about, and they will answer your question in your dream state. Or maybe even in your waking dream, things will pop up that will show you the answer to your questions. So I just want to share that with people, and there is no time like the present to start doing that for everybody. Anybody else want to say anything at this point?
Hi, this is Kelsey from Huntington Beach. Listen to the kid. Sounds like that kid maybe sensed what was going on and got sick. Maybe he sensed he might lose his mom, and so that happened. I don't know, but yeah, the kids are very sensitive and intuitive and aware, and things affect our physical bodies from the other dimensions and the other levels, not just what we eat here or what's happening here. So it's coming from those other levels first to get here. Thank you. That was a great
Well, thank
story.
you.
Thanks for sharing.
Well, thank you, Kelsey. Thank you.